Unified dynamics. Distinction theory.
Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're literally going to build the universe from absolute zero. We're doing a deep proof explainer to show exactly how geometry, energy, and time all emerge from one single, incredibly simple premise. We aren't starting with established physics here. No, we're going way deeper, starting with the foundational logic that makes physical reality possible in the first place.
To do this, I need you to completely forget about things like atoms, fields, and spacetime for a second. Just set all that aside. Instead, I want you to ask yourself a pretty profound question. What if reality is generated not by physical stuff, but by a recursive rule of logic? What if the universe literally builds itself from a single geometric grammar?
Here's our roadmap for demystifying the dense mathematics of unified dynamics. We'll start with the power of distinction, move into building the first geometry, and then look at the emergence of space. After that, we'll tackle energy as the burden state, time as the ordering process, and finally, wrap it up with the unified masterpiece.
All right, part 1, the power of distinction, or telling two things apart.
To build a universe from scratch, we have to start way before geometry and fields even exist. Reality actually begins with a pure event of logic, the instability of an entirely undifferentiated void basically forcing a separation. This primitive act of separating this from that is what we call a distinction. And here's the crucial part. Making this distinction isn't free. It costs a tiny, irreducible unit of effort. We call that a quantum of action, which is needed to pull reality out of total uniformity.
It's exactly like the idea that you can't have structure without first having somewhere for it to be, and something to tell it apart from what it isn't. Our foundational rule here is dead simple. Before absolutely anything can exist, there has to be a difference. 2 points and one connection. It's a separation that forms the ultimate primitive relational object. Because without that very first distinction, nothing can be located and nothing can be related.
Moving into part 2, building the first geometry, from logic to structure.
See, once you actually have a distinction, things can start to connect. There's a beautiful rhythmic repetition to this. A point becomes a line, which is our very first difference. But a line doesn't close, right? It just links. Add a third point though, and that line closes into a triangle. That's the first coherent community of relations where absolutely nothing is left hanging. And finally, that triangle locks into our first 3D Lego block, the tetrahedron. It's the minimal possible shape where every single part perfectly relates to every other part.
So by recursively stacking these tetrahedral shapes, the universe is creating this digital-like web of information. You start at a pre-distinction ground level, move to the first distinction, and keep going. Every time a shape closes, it passes its metadata upward, creating an entire hierarchy of unfolding levels perfectly balanced at zero. But here's the catch. At this stage, this web is still just abstract data. It is not quite a physical space yet.
Which brings us to part 3, the emergence of space, the ignition threshold.
The really crucial point here is that space isn't just a given. It actually has to be generated. Most theories out there just assume space is this pre-existing empty box that stuff happens inside. But in unified dynamics, space is an achievement. Just because you have geometric loops in a network doesn't mean you automatically have a universe. Those loops have to cross a critical threshold of coherence. Space literally has to ignite. It's the very first stable between.
So think about the contrast here. Below that threshold, you basically just have abstract logic looping in on itself. It's unable to support persistence, so it's not a world yet. But the second you cross that threshold and those loops become strong enough, they ignite into what we experience as continuous space. You get a stable relational medium. You suddenly have adjacency, transport, and distinguishable locations. You finally have a place where things can actually happen.
Part 4. Energy, the burdened state. Defect in the geometry.
Okay, so now that we've ignited space, how do we get the actual stuff that lives inside it? Well, the secret is that matter isn't a separate thing that gets dropped into a spatial box. Instead, matter is just a persistent strain, an unresolved load, or a defect trapped within the geometric network itself. It's kind of like a really stubborn knot in a fishing line. When the perfect closure of that network fails and gets frozen in place, that unresolved burden is exactly what we perceive as mass and energy.
If you translate classical physics concepts over into unified dynamics, everything just clicks into place. Matter is simply realized amplitude density. Geometry is the support structure, or space. Computation is the transition rule updating the network. And summation? That's just the closure constraint holding the whole shebang together.
This represents a massive shift in how we understand reality. Matter doesn't just sit in space, and space doesn't merely hold matter. Matter loads the geometry, and geometry routes the matter. They are fundamentally co-equal projections of the exact same underlying structure. It's an endless, elegant derivative loop that's constantly resolving the universe at every single scale.
Now check out this specific fraction, 7/192. In unified dynamics, this isn't just some random parameter. It's the exact mathematical footprint of the network feeding back on itself. It proves mathematically how atomic and cosmological energy emerge totally naturally from the geometry. Physicists don't need to invent arbitrary numbers or tweak variables to make the math work. The exact ratios of reality just fall out of the tetrahedral combinatorics natively.
Let's move to part 5, time, the ordering process, the end of the block universe. This is probably the most mind-bending part of this whole explainer, the genesis of time. Because if space is generated and matter is generated, what about the ticking clock? In classical physics, time is seen as a block universe, a continuous background dimension. But here, time is the actual process of the network updating and testing itself for closure. It's a sequential series of discrete state changes. Time isn't a fixed dimension at all. Time is a process. It's a verb, not a noun. This gives us a stunningly clear picture of how quantum superposition actually works, and it does it without any spooky magic. Time basically has 2 layers. You have deep closure time, where multiple branching configurations exist all at once. And then you have observable time, which is the surface layer that our clocks actually record. Superposition is just multiple deep time configurations projecting into a single observable instant. And a quantum measurement? That's just a time lock, forcing one of those deep branches to become readable reality. To mathematically prove this temporal phase lock, we can look at the physical stresses on the geometry: torsion, curvature, and metric strain. These spatial stresses yield exact spectral eigenvalues: 1/6, 2/6, and 3/6. Add those up, and they perfectly equal exactly 1. This unity, this exact 1, represents the ultimate temporal phase lock. It mechanically defines the geometric invariant of the present moment where all fields align. It is quite literally the math behind the concept of now.
Finally, part 6, the unified masterpiece. One rule: every scale.
We've just built everything from absolute nothingness all the way up to space, energy, and time. And it really all boils down to this. Matter is amplitude made countable, and geometry is amplitude made relational. That is the true beauty of unified dynamics. Reality is just a single recursive rule scaling infinitely. From a microscopic defect to the massive curve of a galaxy cluster, the universe isn't using different rulebooks. It's one perfectly unified geometric grammar.
Whether we're talking about the specific mass of an electron, the expansion of a galaxy, or even the mathematical derivation of timescales, it's all the exact same geometric fractal expressing itself. A distinction becomes a relation, the relation forms a closure, and the closure becomes an object. Everything is fundamentally connected.
So I'll leave you to ponder this massive implication. If the universe is an intricate feedback loop built entirely on the primitive act of drawing distinctions, are our conscious thoughts, our ability to tell this from that, simply the universe finally recognizing itself? I mean, if we're made of the exact same geometric logic as the stars, then human awareness isn't an accident at all. It's the ultimate closure. Thanks for learning with me today, and keep questioning the nature of your reality.